Welcome back to the No Streetlights podcast. We're so excited to have you. Today has been a trial by fire. It's been very confounding. We've needed to exercise a lot of patience, which is something that our guest has a lot of wisdom from her own practice with it. She is publishing a book that is coming out hard copy today, the day that this video releases. Since I cannot do her justice, I will allow her the opportunity to introduce herself. Audience, please welcome the illustrious Sonia Chand.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Aaron and Tim, for having me on here. It's so nice to finally meet you. I've been following you on social media for a while, and I am just starstruck in some ways that I get to finally be here as a guest to talk to you. This is amazing.
I love that you use the word starstruck because we've spent the past 25 minutes doing nothing but technical fixing. And it's like, yes, professional podcasters while their world is like burning. And it's like that meme with the dog. And he's just like, this is fine.
For me, it's the finding out the emperor has no pants constantly. Nobody has any idea what's going on. And we're all doing our best.
Yes.
Yeah, it. With that aside, though, Sonia, it is incredible to have you here. I'm so excited to talk about.
Thank you.
Talk about you. Talk about your book, and just get to know you during our time that we get together today.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to speaking with you guys as well.
So, on your introductory episode of your podcast, On the Spectrum with Sonia Chand, which our audience, please go subscribe, leave a review after you listen to an episode. That really helps us creators intensely.
So much.
One of the first things that you brought up is that you're a first-generation Indian immigrant.
Indian American. I grew up in America.
Sorry, my bad.
And, I am I'll say this, it was difficult in some ways when you grow up as a first generation in America. And I think many people can kind of empathize to this because I don't think my experience in this sense is isolated in that, when your parents come here, they come with a lot of value and culture, right? So my parents immigrated to the US in the late 60s. And even though they've been here for quite some time before I was born, but they still had that strong cultural background value. And they were, and when it came time for them to raise a family, I think they were going by what they knew and how they were raised, right? And I think a lot of times too, because it was different back then, when they came, things were not as accessible in terms of like, okay, if I want to make, let's say they want to make Indian food, where did they go get some of the stuff? Yeah. Whereas today, if somebody were to come in, they know that they could go to a store and things would be readily available for them to go get stuff, and they can put stuff together because they would have ingredients. A lot of stores are selling that kind of stuff now. But back then you had to go to like special shops or go to like ethnic stores, right? To get stuff that you need. And also, when they came in too, they were also coming with like a batch wave of immigration that John F. Kennedy had allowed when he opened the gates for people to start immigrating into this country of professionals, right? So they were coming with a different kind of group, if you will. And, and you think about this too, it's not like they came it's not like they had their parents with them. It's not like they had that support, right? They were kind of building up themselves by the bootstraps practically when they came here.
Wow.
And my immediate circle, we've been talking a lot about international travel recently because we're avid snowboarders. It's snow season. So like, where can you find the best powder? And like, we have a destination wedding we're going to here in March. And every time I'm on a lift talking to somebody about how incredible Japan is, or, the slopes in Poland will really surprise you, the first thing is like, oh, but what about the language barrier? And I just say, download Google Translate. What are you talking about? Which wasn't a thing when your parents immigrated.
Well, luckily for my parents, though, they had to learn English. So there was no, because, well, first and foremost, I should also preface this with, my parents did not just come straight to America after they'd left India. They lived in the UK for a while and in Europe. So
how good
they, and so, I mean, and here's the thing, even going to school, right? My parents went to, like in their medical school, for example, English everybody had to learn. And also the British had ruled India for so long anyway at that point, right? So I guess, in a way it was kind of already integrated, right? In many ways because of that too, right? So you learned it, and so like so for them, luckily language was not an issue when they came here. They had, they knew how to speak perfect English. They could understand everything. They were able to, assimilate in that sense.
That's really good. I feel like a lot of people don't take that kind of stuff into consideration. Like America is, for all intents and purposes, marketed as like this major melting pot where all kinds of, ethnic backgrounds and religious backgrounds and everybody from anything and everywhere can come together and have this incredible society. And my heart really goes out to people who immigrate to America where their first language isn't English. They pick up such a difficult language, and honestly, like that really goes to show how intelligent they are, because I, for the life of me, cannot learn Italian, and I've lived in Italy for 5 years. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. It's embarrassing.
What country do you live?
I live in Naples.
Nice.
Yeah.
Italy is beautiful. I've been there. I went there in 2009. 2009, we went on Christmas, actually. I took my parents. So we went to Rome. We landed actually we landed on Christmas Day.
Yes.
And so we went to our place, the hotel where we were staying, and just chilled out there. And then, just had a relaxing day. Luckily, the food. So basically, I didn't realize this. I thought I had booked a hotel in downtown Rome, like in that, near everything.
Yeah.
The city attraction, all that.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out that actually where I booked us was in a cabin on the outside. But I'll tell you this, it was an experience. I actually thought that was one of the most memorable parts of the trip because it was on the outskirts of Rome. It was not like you're not in the touristy central.
Yeah.
And, the food that I had at the cafeteria there, or the food hall that they had there, cafeteria, amazing food, amazing pasta. I mean, that was open for us. I mean, we even celebrated New Year's Eve at that place because they were open for like lunch and dinner. And I remember I had some of the best wines. I had some of the, all of it.
Did you get to see like the infamous like Italian New Year's fireworks shows?
You know what? I was indoor and we were watching it on a screen at that point, but there were a lot of people there and it was just such a friendly environment. It was just like everybody was at home. And I think, some of the jet lag hit me because I remember I was getting sleepy, but then they were like, no one cared. I mean, I remember it was just like, no one cared. They were all really friendly. Everybody was super sweet. And, we did see all the attractions and everything. And I always, and like you guys mentioned, I love to travel. I love to learn about other cultures. I love to listen to different languages and different, try different cuisines, listen to different kinds of music, international music. I love it all. I really believe that, going to your point about America, that is one of the charms, that you will find about America is of that, right? When people do come together. But unfortunately, there has been a lot of division, right? Like people who are, perfect example, right? Like people who would look at somebody like me, right? Who's brown. And, they'd be like, oh, so where are you from? Or like they would assume like some of the issues that I've had that we'll go into is that a lot of people are quick to blame culture for a lot of the things, right?
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of misunderstanding and ignorance that goes around. So, I mean, and So that's what I think is one of those barriers, right? As much as it's, yes, it's great, to have all these cultures showing. I love it when like Greek Fest happens because I love going to go, and go to the vendors and go listen to some Greek music and watch dances and stuff like that. I love all that. Or like I've been to Italian fests before. It was so much fun, right? Like going to those things, right? Love it all. But this is where also people kind of I think people get compartmentalized a little bit in that sense of, especially if you're not white, there is that, oh, well, where are you from? You're from another country. When truth of the matter is, I grew up in America. I have an American accent. I'm an American citizen. I have an American passport. American passports don't just be given to anybody. You have to be a citizen. Yeah. I mean, come on,
So I was trying to set us up in the beginning, and I did a terrible job. I appreciate your forgiveness and you're willing to expound on it, that the cultural differences are very challenging for people. And as we progress into your story, you had some additional obstacles to overcome.
Sure.
Because, again, one of the very impactful stories you tell in the intro to your book, I believe, is when your family said, oh, well, you should go do a presentation about Diwali. And you brought gifts for your classmates. But instead of being grateful and wanting to learn, having that hunger for knowledge and culture that we're talking about here, it was more, she doesn't fit in.
Right.
So I'm trying to express that I think this world works better when we celebrate each other and work together towards understanding and love and accepting and getting where we need to be.
Absolutely. Yes. And it was a box of chocolates I took in, because usually what happens, so Diwali, for people who don't know it, it's an Indian New Year. It's celebrated according to the Hindu calendar. So some years it could be October, some years it could be November, depending on when it falls in that calendar. And one of the ways that people celebrate, usually what we do is exchange, it's called mithai, which is Indian sweets, basically. People will exchange those. But because I was going to go to school, my parents thought it best we'd take a box of chocolates. And we went to this really nice chocolatier that my parents knew, and that they made really, really good chocolate, all different kinds. And so I took it to school, and I was going to pass it out after I was giving a presentation about it. And there was a lot of a resounding no thank yous. People were polite about it, how they said, at least, no thank you. At least they, but at the same time, you could tell, that there was, but I've also heard people say, well, she's different than us, right? In different, not on that day, but like different days, right? And because, my parents had that idea that if you go to a Catholic school, it's better than your typical public school, because they went to Christian schools, okay? And even though they were Hindu, they went to Christian schools, but their experience of how they went to Christian schools and how they experienced it was different, because they were in a different country altogether, right? And how they, it was a different experience, different time frame for them, right? And versus when you go to a Catholic school in America, right? And it was just a different experience. I mean, I'm not gonna, it just was what it was. It was just different. And, but the idea of being othered and shunned started at that age, first grade, there were some incidences, but like second grade was really when it really drilled in, if you will, where the teacher would dump my desk out in front of all the students. Partly I was never able to keep up with school. I just couldn't do school. As funny and paradoxical as it is, my parents, well-acclaimed physicians, have, and then, for me, I struggled to learn. I was slow, at first. Eventually caught on once I realized that there had to be a system in place for me. Once I had a system in place, then I was able to do school. But, I just never could. I just never could fit in, and I think I was overwhelmed, number one, with being in that environment, being around a lot of noise, being with bells. Then you had those fire drills that were like the loud brrr kind of thing. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I heard it in first grade, I was like, what in the living world is this? And then, yes, and it was just that you had all that going on, and so it was just tough. It was just tough to be there, and then that's, but that was just the foundation. I failed second grade. It happened. If people are asking how you do that, I don't know. I just did. You just have to have, I guess, an evil witch as your teacher, and you have to struggle at school. And that's how you fail second grade. That's the recipe right there. So I went to a public school for my repeat, and similar situation there. I happened to make just maybe one friend because my parents she was also of Indian descent, this girl, and my parents and her family got to know each other. And so, but she was also very socially savvy, like she, and she had two sisters, so she was, she was socially savvy, never really, teachers I never heard of picking on her or anything. I think she was pretty well adjusted in the school, but the teachers, when it came to me, there was this one teacher in particular that was just, well, this is a teacher that would scream at all the kids. Let's just, put it this way too. It wasn't just me per se, but there was one morning I remember when I was lining up to go inside. So you know how they have people line up in the hallway, and then the bell rings, you go into the classroom.
Yeah.
And I've heard people gasping, whoa, when they walked in. So I kind of had a gut feeling maybe something is up, that I wondered, did somebody's desk get dumped or something, right? Sure enough, when I walked in, I saw stuff all over the floor. And when I got closer and closer, I realized it was my desk. And so I saw my homeroom teacher standing by the blackboard. She looked like, honestly, a scared puppy. She gave me this really like a coy smile. Like, she looked as if, she was that puppy that got yelled at after doing business in the house. After having gotten trained not to do it, they go do business in the house and the owner gets upset and says, bad dog, right? That's what she looked like. And I was picking up my stuff. I was, feeling embarrassed once again, because this is not the first time that has happened to me. I had experience from the other school, having my desk dumped and having to be picked up in front of, having to pick it up in front of all the classmates to watch. And I was picking up my stuff, and she came and yelled. The other teacher, she was a reading teacher, came and yelled in the doorway about, of course, the disorganization. And then she accused me of having her stuff in my desk, which I don't see how I would have her stuff. And so she was screaming like that in front of not only my homeroom teacher, but everybody else to hear. And everybody saw me saw the mess. They saw me on the floor picking it up. Of course, nobody was helping me. I was doing this all on my own. And the teacher just stood, like helpless somehow. So that's one memory that really, really, gets me. That's one thing that I remember vividly from my second grade redo. But I also remember the first time when the desk was dumped in my first time I did second grade in that parochial school, where it just happened out of nowhere. We were asked to pull out something. I didn't have it. The teacher came and bent over, saw the desk, and then before I knew it, she picked it up and just dumped it. And I remember looking around the room, seeing mouths agape. And I remember this, I literally had to dissociate for a minute when I was on the floor picking stuff up. And I didn't ever share that with my parents at the time, because I felt so ashamed of who I was at that point then. And I didn't know how, right? And, kids don't know how to do that necessarily.
Yeah.
And it's just so... And this is why, when you hear about things happening and kids going all crazy and stuff, well, not to say what they do is right, but still, it gives you some understanding. It's no excuse, but an understanding as to why,
Yeah.
you see certain kids act the way they act.
yeah, generational trauma certainly builds because it distorts
Mhm.
that personality. We're not meant to be filled with shame and anxiety and feeling othered. So then when someone doesn't heal from that, which our society is not built for healing,
No.
then they go on. And we've talked about the ripple effect ad nauseum on
Oh
the
yeah,
show, so I won't get into that.
absolutely.
But in order to kind of drive this narrative forward and really respect your time, I do want to say that I love that part of your title is from outcast to outstanding,
Yeah.
because it is true. You weren't like them. You went on to achieve a law degree and pass the bar, work on Wall Street, and then become a freaking psychotherapist. So it may be time to get into why you felt othered in these formational developmental periods.
Well, I was never able to fit in, and by the time, my parents moved out of the town that, after second grade redo, which I did pass the second time around, thank God. I went to, my parents moved town, so I changed school districts. And by the time fifth grade rolled around, just me having social issues, because here's the thing. If you don't fix the problem, it'll carry wherever you go, right? So let's say, for example, you have a backache, but really what you have is a slip disc, right?
Yeah.
But if you think that, okay, you take this one painkiller, okay, it didn't do anything, okay, you take another one, right? If you don't really fix the problem, there's nothing else that can be done, right? Like, I was not getting help at the time I needed. And by the time fifth grade rolled around, I had social problems there. I was crying all the time at school. I was known as the crybaby, oversensitive, having meltdowns. I didn't really know how to make or keep friends very well. And I would have these birthday parties as ways to try to win over friends, and people would come. But the thing is, it was not one of those things where it was like reciprocated, right? In the sense of, never being invited back. Or people would just come because it was something to do. And plus my parents lived in a big house at that time. Okay, so people looked at it as, okay, this is a cool house we could go and have fun in. And I remember one time, people had come over, and this was by the time middle school hit, where people started noticing I was getting used for the house. Like my parents noticed, my brother noticed. I started acting out by the time sixth grade came around. So the fifth grade, we went on a field trip to a camping trip. And the whole idea was that we were to learn how the pilgrims lived. And so we went on this camping ground, and the whole thing is we were spending the night in cabins. And one of the things we had to do was like campfire skits. And we were broken up into groups assigned to do a skit. And then after all the skits were done, the principal and the teachers did kind of like a parody comedy act towards the end. And the principal and some the camp managers or whatever, they were there. Some other teachers. The principal said, "Okay, either you can go back to your cabins now, or you can go for a walk around the cabin, around the forest preserve." And a whole bunch of us decided to go for a walk. Meaning all the bunch of classmates. And I for sure was going to go because I loved being active and being in nature. And so I was walking by myself, and at that point, people have kind of made it clear, you don't belong in our group. And I was leaving people their space because I didn't want anyone to be like, can you leave? Because I've had to learn that the hard way, right? So I was walking alone, and the guy that I was crushing on at the time was walking in front of me, and I just was like so frustrated that I saw everybody else be in groups and be part of things. So I just screamed out loud, "I hate myself." The guy turned around and goes, "Hey, Sonia, do you want to kill yourself?" I said, "Yeah." And I didn't think about it. I was like, okay, sure, why not? And then and without warning, I was like, I want to kill myself because that's how much I hate myself. And granted, I did not give stock to any of it. But then after, and then one girl, of course, screamed at me and told me to stop. Can you just stop, instead of being any way supportive. So then I remember I looked up at the sky and I saw a moon, I saw stars. And I thought, okay, well, I could live here, this is nice. It's like calming. It's, I could live here. And this is what I knew of death anyway at that point. I was like, you know what? This is where people go anyway, to the stars, sky, right? So, and I thought about how beautiful it was and how loving it was and how I could live there. So that's, then that's when I guess those fantasies of wanting to die started to come about a little bit. But it got really bad in 6th grade where I made up a cheer about that guy. And out of boredom one day during passing periods, when 6th grade starts, in the middle school, it was all the people from my elementary school class, but then there were 2 other middle schools that fed in. And everybody right away, and the thing is, people kind of were making their friendship groups, people were forming new friends, people were kind of, it was happening rather quickly, and I was not really fitting in. And I was feeling really sad about that at the beginning of the year. And I remember going to the guidance counselor that I had assigned to me at school, because all the middle schoolers had a guidance counselor assigned, depending on what your last name is. So A through K went to one, and then L through Z to the other one. There were only 2 at the time. And I remember going one day and saying, I've had problems making friends before. And I told her about stuff that happened in elementary school. And so what she did, and I get, I understand some of that, but the thing is, I didn't really even have time to process it, because she's like, had me write stuff down on paper. And then she's like, okay, we're going to throw this in the trash. We're going to throw this in the trash. We're going to throw this. And I get this, but at the same time, I didn't really even have time to process it or get it off, because she was just like, okay, that happened in the past, let's throw it away, without really understanding that this is not something you could throw away. Mm-hmm. And I did these cheers. It got to a head because eventually a group of guys came up to me and asked me to do this cheer at a football game where the band had opportunity to do a color guard routine. So I did my color guard routine. I came out, and then my mom was putting away. Now, granted, 1994, 1995 was the 6th grade academic year. 1994, there was no cell phones back then. So you had those old school camcorder cameras, and my mom used to have huge ones, okay? She even had a suitcase box for her equipment, okay?
Yep.
She was putting her stuff away, and this is when people came and surrounded me and was like, do your cheer and do it now and do it, and in a mantra, okay? My mom came by, I told them to leave me alone. They scared off, but my mom called the vice principal, and he had told her he was going to find out who those guys were, but he said that I like to do these things for people. And of course my mom was pissed off about that and didn't approve it. It got so bad to a point where, eventually the school intervened, but it got so bad to a point where, after that, where I just felt really let down that all the attempts that I tried to make at friends didn't work. The attempts that, I wanted to show my elementary school classmates, hey, you didn't like me in elementary school, but I'm going to show you I'm cool. I'm going to show you that you didn't have to reject me and stuff like that. Or, you didn't have to treat me the way you did. That didn't work. I mean, everything went flat on my face. And then I started talking about suicide a lot. And I had to take a 2-week leave of absence. And after I gotten back from the 2-week leave of absence, because I had to come back with a psychiatric note, that's when they started having meetings with my parents saying that I was not their school material. I had to leave. They wanted me to go to a school for troubled children, basically. And my parents resisted. They got a psychiatrist the second time around to advocate on my behalf. But part of being at that school meant that I would be basically treated like a prisoner in plain clothes. So I'd be escorted from class to class. I'd have to go to the resource room first thing in the morning. I'd have to be escorted from class to class. I was not allowed to eat at the cafeteria. I mean, eventually people were able to come and see me in the lunchroom, but honestly, the only people I thought to invite were people whom I thought gave me any kind of attention, even though it was negative, because there were kids who were good at making faces to me at that point too, and being like, ew,
It's a great way to make you feel like you fit in.
Yeah.
Really great way, right?
They're like, hey, your daughter is not fitting in and she's kind of alienated, so we're gonna alienate her even further, and that'll show her. Like, that makes sense, right?
Oh, well, you should have. Well, here's the reasoning. You want to really? This gets better. It gets better. It's actually really comical. She got the school social worker. Okay, said the reason we did that to Sonia is we wanted her to get off people's minds for a bit. Okay, so first and foremost, kids are watching me come in 5 minutes late to class, right? People are watching me leave 5 minutes before with a teacher coming to pick me up or a paraprofessional coming to pick me up from class. People are noticing, that I have to be escorted. I mean, people know that I can't eat in the cafeteria.
We didn't want anyone to notice this passage, so we highlighted it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there we go.
I mean, right?
That makes sense.
Makes so much sense, especially
we made
in
a billboard.
School, like that size, which is small. I mean, it was big, but it was small enough. I mean, everybody knew each other.
Yeah.
So people know.
Because that makes me think to, like, if we had a fellow classmate who had something similar going on, we would have 100% noticed it, and everybody would have been talking. Like,
yes, exactly.
Their reasoning is outstandingly stupid. Like, I tell people, like, I find myself in a situation where I don't get surprised very often by how people act. But that is very surprising. Hopefully they don't still do stuff like that. There's no way. Like, there's no way, right?
You could hope not, but you know what? There are many. Well, people do know about who's in the special ed class. There are comments being made because you know what? I have clients that I work with who are in middle school and high school, and it's still happening, but differently, People are now using the word autism to insult somebody now. Kind of like how people used the word gay back in the 90s, right? When somebody was called, oh, that thing is gay or this is gay, right? Like that was kind of how, even though back in the 90s, right, people didn't know any better. I don't think a lot. Now, like the understanding of what we know, why that's harmful, the way we know it today is different. But I feel like because also when I was growing up, autism was nowhere in people's radars. People didn't know about it unless you were Rain Man, right? So, or unless, you were a guy or really, really showing, because when it comes to girls and how they present, right? And here's the thing, I was always labeled as emotionally handicapped, learning disabled, ADHD. But the thing is, so I was put on medication too, growing up, for depression. The psychiatrist said, oh, you're just depressed. And then when I was about to get kicked out of school, he changed my medication. So I had to take lithium. And that was part of the restriction as well, that I had to be on my medicine. I had to be on lithium twice a day. So I had to take lithium at breakfast and then at lunch. And I'll tell you, it tasted horrible. Now, I don't want to dog the medicine completely because you know what? It is used to help treat bipolar disorder, but that didn't do anything for me. I was not bipolar,
Yeah.
I was, in a bad environment. I was on the spectrum. I needed help in that area of like social skills training, things like that. And the restrictions lasted 6th and 7th grade. 7th grade, things let up a little bit. By 8th grade, I was completely free. They let me off completely. But by then, I've already been stereotyped.
Everyone knew.
I was already stereotyped, and bullying was bad in 8th grade, and this is the thing, and then people just kind of ostracized me. And when I was in 9th grade, I went to this therapist that my parents found. She also didn't do it justice either eventually, because she went, the first time she did go to the high school and advocate for me, saying this is what's happening to Sonia. She's getting treated poorly, and they made this norm up about her that anybody who wants to be Sonia's friend is going to be the out group, right? But then after, this is the thing, and this is where boundaries got blurred a little bit, because she was of Indian descent, and here's the thing, my parents were too kind. They were not going to do anything. She went and talked to some classmates about me, okay? And she tried to facilitate a friendship with one girl in particular. That girl was, I don't think, I just, in my gut, she was a nice girl and all, but I think there was more to the story. I think they were looking for more from, from my family, because my family was doctors. Her family was in the healthcare business. I think they wanted some business deal. You know what I mean? I think there was something more to it, right? And I feel like and here's the thing, she used to ask all the time, because she wasn't in the middle school in 6th and 7th grade, right? So she wasn't even in that middle school at the time I was doing any of this stuff, rather. So she wasn't there. But when she came to the school, she already was inundated with the stories of what I used to do. She already knew my reputation, right, really quickly. And she used to ask all these questions. Why'd you do this? And like, why'd you say that you jumped out of a car? Why did you say that, she was asking questions a lot about my past. And I didn't want to hear this. And then she used to talk about how like people used to be making fun of me and stuff like that. And here's the thing. Why are you telling me? And that used to not make me feel good at all. Like, if you're my friend, if you're supposed to be a friend, right, and you already know somebody's struggling socially, if you're on one hand going behind that person's back and saying, hey, I've got your back, and if and she went and told this therapist that, she stood up for me against 3 girls, okay, who were saying stuff about me. Then you know what? Build me up in person too. Don't just build me up behind my back, but then tear me down with what everybody said, or how people are laughing at me, or how, she doesn't want to include me yet because in her other group of friends, because she doesn't want to make other people feel uncomfortable or something like that. She said something like, she goes, I have to ask my friends first if you can join us to this place because we don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. I mean, that's not,
Okay, well, now I feel uncomfortable. Thanks.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, now what I do. And even though like our friendship, we had a falling out, she thought I was too insecure, which, here's the thing. Yes, I had a lot of insecurities, but at the same time, my insecurities came because I should have also stood up for myself more. I should have said, I'm not answering this question. The answer is no. And if, she couldn't handle the boundaries, then that was not a friend, right? This is, if I would have known back then what I know now. After the friendship falling out happened, of course, the therapist's relationship got contentious. She got mad at me and accused me of being attention seeking and, told me I was not worthy of having as a friend, stuff like that. Yeah, this therapist went off, like really went for it,
Holy
and here's the
crap.
thing. Okay, there were things I have done, and I will say this, where, yes, I had, I was a toxic person in the summer of going into 8th grade because I was so beaten down. I did not even know how to be anyone's friend. So there was a family friend who tried to be a friend, but I was not happy. But I also knew, right?
I kind of need this opportunity to advocate for young Sonia.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't toxic. You were abused socially.
But I was shamed for how I acted. And here's the thing, I do take responsibility for some of how I acted. I do. But the thing is, just to be shamed by a therapist saying I was attention seeking, stuff like that, she should not have been talking about me in the first place to anybody.
No.
We're talking, this was 1997, 1998 was my freshman year, and 1998, towards the end of my freshman year, so we're going into sophomore, 98, 1999, I mean, I'm sure there was HIPAA in place, or I'm sure there was some, because I know that, but therapists were, I think, but here's the thing, because she knew she could get away with it, and she knew my parents did not do anything, so.
That's disgusting.
I think it's because she could get away with it. And it's funny, because years later when I saw her, because I had to go see her husband they had to do a test for extended time. She thought I went to school in India. Can you believe this? Like, she couldn't even believe I graduated the high school. And she's like, well, maybe you didn't like it and came back. And I remember I was sharing this with one of my best friends, this story. And she goes, Sonia, is it possible that she made that up herself, that rumor? Because I was thinking maybe some kid told her at school. And here's the thing. People could say anything about me and it would have been believed easy, right? She would have believed anything. Somebody could have told her I went to jail and she probably would have believed it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and when people are determined to think you're a piece of garbage, people will believe anything to prove it, right? So that would prove it, right? So somebody could have easily made up narratives. Sonia got arrested at school, she would have believed it, I think. But then, again, right? Not my problem, right? It's a her thing. But
just to clarify, right? And I don't want to stick on, talking about this person too much longer. But I just want to make sure, like, this was a therapist, right? Like a mental health professional, a person who was certified to help, like, youth and people who needed, any kind of counseling, right? Like, I'm not crazy.
Right. But you know what it is, too? I think because of the culture, because I think there was culture bias involved. She probably, and as I had a lot of time to reflect on this, maybe she couldn't see me as just any other client, right? As if, if I was another race or another ethnicity or something, right, it'd be different. But because I shared the same ethnicity like she did, she couldn't push past it, right? There's a lot of culture bias. And this is why we talk about in therapy, you learn about this when you go to train to be a therapist, transference and countertransference, right? The transference is when a therapist starts projecting their stuff onto their client, right? And then when a client starts treating that therapist as something different than the therapist, right? Like, it's like, it's like where I guess visions get skewy, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Of how I remember transference and countertransference to be. So I think that, there was a lot of that going on. But once again, because, I grew up in a family, here's the thing, and unfortunately, this is, they were considered, of course, they fit that model minority stereotype, right? I grew up in that family, right, where you don't make ruffles, case in point, the school took advantage of my parents with the restriction stuff. It's because they didn't know the school system. Mm-hmm. But they also were kind enough to just go with it, right? They didn't know how to advocate. They were a little bit soft in that sense. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're good people. I don't blame them for what they did. I think they were just operating in a place of what they knew. I'm not blaming my parents. I'm not angry. I've even, when I think about that therapist too, I think, there was stuff that she had going on, right? That had nothing to do with me. Now that I think about that, right? I've had time to reflect and take some of that shame away. But for a lot of times, and this is the thing too, the bullying never stopped. Even when you left high school, college, law school, other places, I was bullied there too. But, and for a long time, I will say this, I had a love-hate relationship with myself. It's that idea of, everybody hates me. Everybody, thinks I'm a piece of garbage. You know what? Guess what? I'm a piece of garbage too. I'm going to think that way too. Everybody hates me. I'm going to hate myself too.
You took on what people were saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For the longest time, I felt like I was no good. I felt like I was unworthy. I felt like, I couldn't, and when I look back, some of the pictures that I see of myself, I remember I was looking through some old photos the other day and I saw, photos back from when I was like high school, middle school. You could see that there was pain behind the smile. You could. When I look at those pictures, I feel it. I don't know if anybody else would be able to see it, but when I look at them, I know.
Yeah.
Even in, so I just feel like for the longest time, because I've been told my whole life I was nothing, nobody, I was rejected a lot, stuff like that. Just everything was always wrong with me. Wrong. College roommate just lambasted me for how I was, for things I was just trying to grow. It was just like people couldn't understand it.
I'm incredibly grateful for you coming on and sharing this story.
Oh, thank you.
If the people listening aren't angry, you should be. This should upset you to the point to where you want to aggressively advocate for other people. If you see someone engaging in this type of behavior, you should have no option but to step in and correct that action. One of the main points of this show is kindness through understanding, etc. But another key focus is that it gets better concept.
Yes.
So, Sonia Chand is not a broken, abused child. Sonia Chand is a published author, an avid marathoner, and I don't know if anything is more impressive than this, but you're also a podcaster. You're a huge advocate for the autism community.
I really am, because I feel I want to give people what I never got.
Yeah.
And the most important time to get that stuff is in your formative years. Even adults that I see who are on the autism spectrum, you know what? I love building them up. I will have the same conversation 5 million times if I have to, because I know it's a rote learning process with people on the autism spectrum. So what this means is there's a lot of repetition involved. And sometimes people have to be explained things again. And a lot of people don't have that patience. And I think this is where that things can go askew, is that a lot of people don't have the patience. Heck, many mental health professionals don't have the patience sometimes, that I've noticed, right? So, and there's a lot of training that needs to be done in the mental health field when it comes to autism, big time. And I'm not afraid to say this, and I don't care if they come after me and take my license away for saying this, but there's a lot of training that needs to be done in this area, because a lot of therapists don't know jack, okay? They really don't. I hate to say this. So, and I'm not saying all, there are some therapists that are amazing. So, like, one I saw starting my junior year of high school, she was amazing, okay? Like, even though, yes, did we have our moments at times? True. But one thing, and I labeled a chapter after this called The Code is Purple. And one thing she said, and this is the first thing she said is, Sonia, what color is my coat? I said, purple. She goes, okay, Sonia, what if I tell you it's lime green and you're wrong? I said, I will say that it's purple. She said, okay, this is the thing, Sonia, my coat is purple. But if I choose to see the coat as lime green, that's on me. That's not about that's not you. And I talk about this concept, and I actually loved it so much I even labeled a chapter of that in my book. But
Hell yeah.
But she was the one who pushed me. This is how the diagnosis started to come, is she pushed me to get a psychological evaluation after my freshman year of college, because I went to a local school my first year, and she was noticing I was still struggling then, and noticing that I was still fixated on topics. And you notice that I would go through a whole session talking about the same thing again, and again, and again, and again, and going through the same stories again and again, and not realizing. And she said, Sonia, I think there's more to the story here. I think you need to be tested. And I got tested. And then my sophomore year of college, I saw a neuropsychologist, and she diagnosed me with what is formerly known as Asperger's syndrome. They don't use Asperger's anymore. They use just autism spectrum disorder. Two things. The DSM-5, when it came out, they took what was formerly known as Asperger's syndrome, which would refer to like high functioning autism. They clumped it in with autism spectrum disorder. And number two, as I came to learn from some clients, I didn't realize this, is there was a stigma against using Asperger's syndrome, because Hans Asperger, the one who came up with the diagnosis to describe boys who are very intelligent, but socially not savvy and not skilled, and had that challenge. He was also part of, it's been rumored, I have to do some more research on this to confirm all of it, but I do believe my clients when they say this, that he was a eugenist, where he was with them he was with the Nazi regime. But I think the people that he diagnosed were used as test experiment or something. Like they were found, they were worked. Let's just put it this way. The people that he diagnosed, I think they were worked during the World War II.
So this is how you found out.
Yeah, I found out eventually, because what happened is then, I told you about the roommate that I had. So I had a roommate. So I went to the main campus of college, and I did a summer school course, summer of 2002. I would have been going into my sophomore year of college. And there was just certain ways I was acting that I wasn't realizing. I had a crush on someone in the dorm, and I kept talking about him. And they kind of, call me out on certain behaviors, that stuff that they saw me doing. Like I'd bring him up in conversations he wasn't part of, or they just noticed a lot. They just noticed a lot, like, of certain things I would be doing. And so such as, like bringing him up on every conversation, trying, they thought I was trying to fit in with people I wasn't, and I seriously wasn't trying to fit in with anybody. Just certain ways I was coming across to people, I guess. And so then I took that to the neuropsych, and that's when it was confirmed.
The thing I want us to focus in on in these closing few minutes that you have left with us is I want to hear about you coming into your power and finding the things you love to help drive your life forward. Now that you've made it out of that darkness, you've done your Shawshank Mile. I want to hear how beautiful life is now.
So I absolutely love it now. There was a lot of trials and tribulations. Of course, I was forced to go into the law field. Family pressure, because a lot of Indians face this, and this is not just an anomaly with me, but unfortunately too many Indian parents put this pressure on their kids to either become doctors or lawyers or engineers, and most often than not, a lot of people grow up thinking their self-worth is their career, right? So if you don't have any of this, then you're not worth much, kind of mentality that a lot of people grow up with. Especially the Indian community, if you don't become a doctor, you don't become a lawyer, you're going to just be garbage, right? So, I went to law school, even though I knew my heart was not in it. I knew, and I didn't fit in there, quite surprisingly, right? So, not surprisingly rather, but, it was just not there, I was just forced to do it because I felt like that was something I had to do, and I really wanted to drop out. To be honest, I remember calling my parents being like, can I please just drop out? No, you make yourself like it. My mom would, discourage it too. And the thing is, I was not happy. So, I did struggle quite a bit, with engaging in self-injurious behaviors and binging and things like that, because I was not happy. And I didn't feel supported. Eventually, it all came to a head when I lived in New York City, and I would binge eat to a point where my weight was unhealthy, and I'd get chest pain because my weight was so unhealthy. And I was struggling to keep jobs because I would only get contract jobs, and I wasn't, it wasn't for me. It wasn't filling me up. So, and I always knew I wanted to be a therapist. I always knew I was better suited at helping people in other ways, right? And there's, so one thing I will say is, eventually I gained a lot of courage with the support of people that I met. And I saw a therapist, I found a really amazing therapist who has a psychoanalyst background. And I went to her twice a week for a while. And, she was also really instrumental in just helping me step into my power. And you know what I did? I just left it, and I moved back to Chicago in April of 2016. Started my mental health journey there because mental health school training. I lived in New York from 2011 to 2016 because that was my last ditch effort to try to like law. So I went and got an LLM in finance. Now, don't get me wrong, I actually enjoyed learning some of the material, but I never enjoyed the work. Okay. And I met some great people while I was there, but you know what? It's okay. That would have been one thing if I forced myself on my own money to do this, right? But because my parents were financially controlling it, right? So I did what I could, right? I couldn't do it anymore. And I switched, and I'll tell you this, I made more money being a therapist than I ever did in the legal field. I have more success now, with other things that I'm doing, and I just really feel like, like I got into running, and that helped a lot too. And I run for Autism Speaks in these marathons, and this is a cause I really love. I do a lot for, to give back. And, I have my book coming out soon that I started writing in 2005. And I really loved, I love the whole, I have actually a copy of the hardcover in front of me, and I just love what I have going on now. I feel like it took a lot of work. It took a lot of, I do struggle still with my mental health. I'm not going to lie on here and say that I don't. Are there moments when I really get really, really sad and feel it, feeling the ringer and down in the dumps the most? 100%.
Girl,
right?
same.
Yes, I feel it. It's like, and especially when you feel like, like myself, I'll be vulnerable on here for a quick second. I like never had a relationship before, and I'm 42. I'm gonna be 43 this year. I mean, I feel that in my bones. I'm like, okay, well, and my mind does those tricks on me. Oh, Sonia, they laugh at you. They will say, oh, they'd never go out with you. They never. Oh, okay, maybe I'm not the girl that anybody would ever go out with, or who'd want to go out with you, who'd want to take you out. Okay, well, maybe nobody wants to take me out, right? Like those kinds of things, that will go through my mind, or sometimes just, those flashbacks of what people have said before, of not being good enough, or everything wrong. Those things sometimes run through my mind too. And so, I struggle in that sense a lot too.
Thank you for sharing that.
And I think one of the things I talk about in here is, even though, yes, I don't have it all figured out yet, but one thing, I would say is, and I do say this, is if you are being bullied, or if people are putting you down, please realize that it's not about you, right? You will never be good enough for people who are not right for you. And it's easy, people think it's easy to throw somebody away. It's easy to lambaste somebody who's on the autism spectrum. And the reason they do this, just realize that it's not about because of you. It's they are scared in themselves, right? It's short-sightedness. It's they're scared of your potential. They're scared, of things that are different. They're scared, it's their own stuff.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, you have given us so much to consider and be grateful for and advocate for on this episode. So
Well, thank you so much.
I want to give you just a quick minute to plug all of your things and maybe provide some resources for people who may be going through similar things.
Yeah, so I can be found on Instagram, Chand_Sonia, CHAND_SONIA. I'm also on LinkedIn, Facebook, and TikTok. Sonia Krishna Chand is the name, SONIA KRISHNACHAND. My book, Dropped in a Maze, will be available on Amazon in the near future. So you can look into it. Basically, the book talks about some of what I shared on here today, but it goes more in depth. It goes into also learning lessons I've learned along the way, and it gives some tips and tricks, rather, if you will, on what people can do if they find themselves in certain situations. Or, I think, and one thing I want to also make clear is this book, yes, is it about being on the spectrum? Absolutely. But it's also relatable for those who are not on the spectrum, but anybody who's ever felt othered, rejected, outcasted in any kind of way, somebody who feels like they did not walk the beaten path, right? Somebody who felt like, there was no safety in numbers, right? Like, this is kind of where and it talks about, cultural implications of what was it like to be on the spectrum and being part of a culture that I was part of. What is it like to be breaking the mold, if you will? What is it like to be struggling mentally? What is it like to not, the difference between good and bad therapists? What, like those experiences, all this, like all different kinds of dynamics are discussed in here. Toxic friendships. When is a friendship good and when is it not? And when is it time to actually maybe step up and stand up for yourself in a friendship that's not good for you?
Yeah. Incredibly important lessons.
All incredibly, it's valuable. It's been a long time in the making, and I'm so happy that this is finally coming to light. And, once again, to protect individuals and privacy, no towns are used, no actual names of schools are mentioned. Even the names of the graduate programs I went to are not mentioned, or rather the schools I went to. It's all to protect individuals' privacies, give people, that respect and courtesy. But yes, it's just a very, but this is, once again, it's not to blame anybody or shame anybody. It's just to talk about experience through my eyes.
And these tips, tricks, lessons are all coming from a psychotherapist. It's not just some Joe Schmo off the road. It's somebody who knows something about something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm very happy to be able to provide this with the world.
One thing that I know for sure is talking about where I stepped out. There's a lot of people who are struggling. They don't realize why they're struggling necessarily. So there are leaps and bounds that do need to be made in the, psychoanalyzing and therapy world and mental health profession.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, most of what I've been dealing with lately have centered around children with problematic behaviors that are manifesting in various different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I just really hope that people get their hands on your book and take the lessons and stories that you told about today on this podcast and are able to find actionable steps to help them and help their kids or their family members or, friends, anybody and everybody. Somebody's going through something, and, there are steps and things for them to do to get the help that they need.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I understand you need to go get ready for work. So thank you so much for joining us, Sonia. This has been an incredible opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for having me on here. I really feel very humbled and honored to be on here.
The honor is ours.
Yeah. I know for a fact that your story had hit me in a lot of ways that made me feel very upset, like Aaron mentioned earlier. And I'm so glad that you've taken what has happened to you and turned it around into, I went through my Shawshank Mile. I'm making sure nobody else has to.
And I'd love to hear more about this when you guys come on my episode. I'll send you a message. I'd love you both to show up on my podcast, please. That would be wonderful.
We would be honored.
I love being a guest on podcasts. It's one of my absolute favorite things to do. So
Yes.
I'm so excited for that.
Yes.
And I do want to give a huge thank you to the listeners. If you've made it to this part in the episode, I hope that you take a look at Sonia's podcast. All of her links are going to be down in the description below. She has a plethora of experience and knowledge to share with all of you. So you all are incredible. And Sonia, you are incredible too. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Shout out to our top supporters. We have an amazing Patreon community. Our top tier is currently being resided in by the glorious Jason Grooms and the magnanimous Eric Spears. Tim, who's sitting on that next tier?
The tier down below our top supporters sits some of our absolute highest and longest running fans and friends of the show. We have the one, the only Highland Markle, and there is nobody else but Ketria, who was a guest on our show and has her own episode, as does Highland, as does Eric, and so does, you guessed it, Jason. Our biggest fans are also some of our funnest guests, and they all have taught us something incredible. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Quick reminder, our podcast cannot be substituted for professional medical advice.
If you need help, please text or call 988 or call 911 for immediate medical intervention.
If you need protracted support and you don't have a Sonia Chand in your area, you could use our code on betterhelp.com. Just hit a /NSLP there at the end, gets you 10% off your first month, and it helps out the channel quite a bit.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for today. And thank you for all the work you're doing in promoting mental health and bringing awareness. And, I really love following you guys. I've been following you for a while on Instagram. So, really love it. And also my podcast On the Spectrum with Sonia, it's available on all audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Podmat, just anywhere you go.
Definitely check it out, everybody. We like to end the show in the same way because Aaron and I are very much stuck in our ways. So I would like to say very much, be good to yourselves and each other.
We love you.
Yes. We love you. And we are one. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia.
No street lights, but we're finding our way. In the dark, but we've got something to say. Lessons learned and stories untold. Come on in, let the truth unfold.